Imagine two people standing in the same grocery store on the same afternoon, each buying nearly identical food, household supplies, and everyday necessities. They walk to the same aisles, compare similar prices, and leave with shopping bags that appear almost identical. Yet one quietly spends far more than the other over the course of a year without purchasing anything noticeably luxurious. The difference is not simply inflation or bad luck. It comes from a collection of small economic forces that gradually reshape the cost of everyday life until higher prices begin to feel normal. Understanding this process explains why so many people feel that money stretches less than it once did, even when their income has increased. Many people assume expensive living begins with major purchases like buying a larger home or driving a more expensive vehicle. In reality, rising costs often begin through tiny adjustments that barely attract attention. A coffee that costs slightly more than last month, a streaming subscription with a small price increase, groceries that quietly shrink in size while keeping similar prices, and utility bills that edge upward each year all seem insignificant on their own. Because each increase is relatively small, the human brain adapts remarkably quickly, treating today's price as a new normal rather than comparing it carefully with yesterday's. Behavioral economists sometimes describe this pattern as adaptation. Instead of reacting strongly to gradual change, people recalibrate their expectations. What once seemed expensive eventually feels ordinary, simply because it has been repeated enough times. This psychological adjustment is useful for coping with everyday life, but it also makes long-term price increases surprisingly difficult to notice. Rather than experiencing one dramatic financial shock, households often experience hundreds of tiny ones that accumulate almost invisibly. Inflation is only part of the story. Businesses also respond to changing costs, consumer behavior, competition, and purchasing psychology. Sometimes prices rise directly. Other times products become slightly smaller while maintaining the same price, a practice often called shrinkflation. In other situations, optional fees slowly become standard, turning what once appeared to be an affordable purchase into a noticeably more expensive one after taxes, service charges, or subscription renewals are included. Each adjustment may seem modest, but together they change the mathematics of everyday spending. Consider a simple example. Imagine spending just $3 more each day than you did a year ago without consciously noticing the difference. $3 feels relatively small in a single transaction, but over an entire year it adds up to more than $1,000. No dramatic purchase caused that increase. Instead, dozens of tiny price changes combine into one meaningful financial outcome. This illustrates why daily habits and economic systems often matter more than isolated spending decisions. Psychology strengthens this effect through something known as anchoring. The first price people see becomes a mental reference point, even if that reference gradually changes over time. As new prices appear repeatedly, yesterday's expensive item begins to look reasonable compared with today's higher one. Businesses understand this tendency and often present pricing in ways that encourage comparison with an even larger number rather than with historical costs. As a result, consumers focus on relative value instead of noticing how the entire pricing landscape has shifted upward. Historical periods of rising prices show similar patterns. Families gradually adjusted their budgets, substituted products, delayed purchases, and accepted higher costs over time. The adjustment was psychological as much as mathematical. The important lesson is not to fear rising prices, but to understand the systems that produce them. When people recognize how gradual increases influence spending over months and years, they can make more informed financial decisions. Looking beyond individual purchases and examining long-term patterns provides a clearer picture of where money is actually going. The math behind why everything feels more expensive is not hidden because it is complicated. It is hidden because it unfolds slowly enough for human psychology to adapt before most people notice. By understanding both the numbers and behavioral patterns behind everyday spending, it becomes easier to see why the same standard of living can quietly require more money over time.